There's lots more to come when CBC News Today continues. As I said earlier, we'll go to Merritt in BC for that town hall meeting. We'll hear from the Canadian Space Society on the government's refusal to allow an American company to buy Canadian space technology. And we'll get the American plans for dealing with a surge of violence in Iraq. Stay with us. McDonald, Detweiler and Associates, or MDA, is best known as the maker of the Canadarm and the robot called Dexter. It also produces RadarSat, an observation satellite that monitors the environment and natural resources on Earth. Those gadgets are significant for emotional and scientific reasons. Kevin Shortt is president of the Canadian Space Society, a group that lobbies for space exploration, and he joins us now. So Kevin, very simply, why should Canadians be concerned about this company being sold to an American firm?
The greatest source of concern lies in the fact that the Canadian government has invested several $100 million into the building of RadarSat-2 with the expectation that that investment would be returned in the form of licensing for the data that's obtained from RadarSat. Now, with the policies that are in place between the United States and Canada, they're very strict guidelines, and there's a lot of control that the U.S. imposes in terms of where its data is heading. So the fact that RadarSat-2 would have been owned by an American company would put a lot of restrictions on who Canada could distribute that data to. So it's, that we don't get our money back, essentially.
And also, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of taxpayers' money, hundreds of millions of dollars, have gone into the development of this very high-tech space technology that would otherwise maybe not have been built had it not been for those taxpayer dollars, right?
Well, and this is where all funding pretty much for the space industry comes from the Canadian government. A large portion of the space industry is supported by Canadian government funding, which of course comes back to Canadian taxpayers. So there's all of the money that comes from the agency is, Canada's money. So, we want to see something come back from that, and that comes in the form of data that is used by companies across Canada for environmental monitoring and of particular note for Arctic sovereignty.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that, because the RadarSat in my background I was reading is quite incredible. It can see a vessel of anything more than 3 meters long. I mean, that's probably the length of this news desk we're sitting on here. That's not very big. So that is very key in terms of the new fight that seems to be looming over Arctic sovereignty.
Exactly,
right?
and that's what makes RadarSat-2 that much better than RadarSat-1, and that is one of the key things that a lot of policymakers are looking at, in the fact that because RadarSat-2 has that kind of resolution, it makes it a big national security issue, and that's where the root of the problem is, or the root of the concerns are, as far as RadarSat-2 being controlled by an American company.
So tell me a little bit more about that. So let's say there's some kind of dispute over Arctic sovereignty, and we want to use RadarSat-2 to find out whether or not there's a vessel going through those waters. Would we be able to call up this American firm and say, hey, we want a visual on that right now? That's the question, right?
Exactly, and the answer to that, the not so short answer to it, is the fact that there is the possibility that the U.S. can say, no, we can't give you that data for national security reasons. There may be things that, ships passing through that they, don't necessarily want to be tracked. So it's these kinds of things that worries the Canadian government.
Okay, let's switch things around here. Can you imagine a scenario where it were, say, the Americans who had a company that developed extremely important space technology, put up some important satellites that are there for monitoring their national security or their sovereignty, where hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of tax money went into it? Can you imagine them allowing the sale of that company, say, to Canada or to Europe?
Well, there are, again, I've alluded to these policies, and most notably this one called ITAR, which is International Traffic Arms and Regulations. And what that stipulates is that any technology that can be even remotely construed as being useful for military applications does not leave the States and is controlled by the States. So to have such a sale coming from the States in this political environment is pretty much impossible.
Okay, let's move ahead a little bit to so within the next 30 days, days, the company can submit information to the industry minister, Jim Prentice, and say, okay, I can see that you're concerned about this. What if we give you this? What if we allow you access to the RadarSat? Can you see that the government finally saying, all right, well, under those conditions, we will allow this to go through? Because this would be the first time that a company has actually been blocked from buying a Canadian company.
Yeah, and it's something that, you know, would be nice to see perhaps more often in terms of like the exchange of sales and seeing the Canadian government get a little bit more involved in what the state of the space industry is. So, you know, certainly getting the Canadian government involved in this and you know, having them block is a significant thing. The fact of the matter, if they can actually appeal and say, oh, you know, and work the government down, that's cause for concern because policies are always changing. So even the political climate now, even if it says, well, yeah, okay, we'll let you do it, there's nothing saying that in the future they could renege on that and say, well, no, okay, now we're not going to allow you that access to data at all, because all the time, especially in remote sensing, you're talking about a satellite that can take a picture anywhere on Earth within a matter of hours. And that kind of ability always makes, you know, defense people very nervous. And so when you have a changing political climate, you want to have control over those assets. So it's something that, yeah, we could say yes and maybe get some things in return now, but there's no guarantees what the future would be.
Kevin, good to speak to you about this. Thanks very much.
My pleasure.
So for now, Canada's biggest space technology company won't be sold. We've heard the political reaction. Jeannie Lee is back with the market reaction. So Jeannie, what's been the stock market response to this story?
Well, this is big news because it is a no, Andrew, and because it's the first no from Ottawa when it comes to a foreign takeover of a Canadian company, as you pointed out. So investors are also saying no to shares of McDonald, Detweiler and Company. They have plunged as much as 10% today to roughly $42.50 a share now is the level. That is a drop of more than 9% now. When just 3 months ago, look at the start of that chart, they shot up on the news that Alliant Tech Systems of the U.S. wanted to buy the space division. The stock has since been pretty bumpy as buzz began building that maybe there would be no done deal. Alliant still has 30 days to state its case to win approval for the sale.